We can get started while we just wait for people to filter in. Darren, thank you for joining us today as our
Sure.
investor in the chair. And everyone, thank you for joining our office hours today. We have a special session with Darren to answer any investor-related questions about startups, funding, etc., etc. When you do post your question, please do so in the chat, and I will read them off as they come. If you would like to post anonymously, if you're sharing some information, that might be confidential, you can do so by going into the meeting tools and selecting Q&A, and then there's a little button that allows you to post anonymously, and I'll be reading those off as well. So without further ado, oh, please feel free to start posting your questions in the chat, and Darren, I'll get us started. Darren, so
All right.
yesterday we had a few pitches in the community, and they were mixed. There was a mix of founders. Some were first time, some were more experienced. What are some patterns that you have recognized between maybe like more exited founders versus first time founders in terms of their pitches? Like what kind of information is one putting out more than the other, or vice versa?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that you have two challenges. The more polished founder, the one who's gone through an accelerator, they've been geared to do a three to at most 5 minute pitch. I find those to not be very valuable because you can't get enough information to even really ask good questions about the product, because it's such a skim that you remember they're going through their product, they're going through their market, they're going through their funding request. So there's not much time spent on each of those. So I think in some cases, those founders, we tend to lose some things on, where I think the other side of it is the newer founder, the one who hasn't pitched as much, they tend to put maybe too much information in, and then they have a hard time getting through the 10-minute time limit that we've got. It's not that the information that they've put in is necessarily bad. It's discerning between what's truly important and what's kind of extraneous. I think we had a good conversation with the person who was doing the thing that was going to save system time at companies, cloud computing time, right? That we were able to talk to him at the end about having a visual of a skyscraper with lights on and janitors and all those things that makes it more accessible for people. So I think I like the newer pitch format because I think it gives us time to get a good read on the company and then also have a good questions and conversation about what basically they could improve in their pitch.
Right. And I remember like even like during the pitch, there wasn't a moment where the person was going too deep into the whole tech, so that people listening, even like like non-technical people, weren't getting so lost. Like
Right.
you even mentioned that like you weren't that technical person, so then we went through that whole building with the lights on analogy. But even then, like I understand. Oh, okay. It's saving this by doing this, not going too deep into the tech. But then we're just talking about, okay, he's out there, he's talking to potential customers, and he's out there getting those contracts. So, that was definitely a kind of a variety that, or like difference that we saw between founders who are like, okay, we're going to spend like half of the pitch just talking about the tech. Why is this so great? Why are we the only ones doing this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's usually people who are a little more experienced do better the components of the pitch better, because they know the key components of a pitch, where newer people, I think, kind of they get really focused on their idea because that's what they're the most passionate about. So they love talking about their idea and why it's creative and why it's different, and that can tend to drag on a bit in the pitches if it's someone who's newer.
Right. Would you say like you would prefer to have those kind of deep dive conversations like after the pitch where you just want to kind of know, okay, the general idea of the business, and then maybe if you were so interested, because sometimes like, you know, learning about the tech can help to understand the moat in a way.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think the idea, like what I was saying and why I pushed for the 10-minute versus the 5, right, is to me the purpose of this pitch in meeting with investors is to create curiosity, right? So I'll be following up with the guy with the computing savings thing because I think it's a great idea. And I'm like, I was talking to Adam afterwards, or we were talking a little bit afterwards, and I'm like, if they happen to get 10 enterprise customers at $1 million a piece, and you're going in and investing in a $12 million valuation, I mean, you just hit a home run, right? I mean, like, because now that valuation is going to be 5x that. So, and it's not hard to see that path to the home run, right? I mean, they just need to get a few big enterprise clients or get in with um, the government. I mean, if they got into the government and got a government contract, I mean, that would blow the doors off too. So there's not a lot that seems out of the realm of possibility. Um, and then the person who I pitched, I believe it was last week, the one who had the trading software.
Mhm.
I've already followed up with him and had a meeting with them yesterday. So like to me, it's about creating curiosity.
Right.
It's like, do I want to know more about it? The certain ones, like, I also, you can do a great pitch, but I may not see the viability of your product, which was a conversation I had. We followed up with were you there for the SnapMiss presentation?
I was not. I was unfortunately away that week.
Okay. It's a creative idea. It's setting up in malls with backdrops for pictures and then getting people to purchase the pictures and some ancillary add-on things. But I had a follow-on conversation with him about just the economics and what drives it. Like, how do you get scale? And if you've got to add people in here to staff it, and you've got to get that issue resolved before you can really be investable.
Right.
So again, each one is a little different, but if I've got something that I'm curious about, or I feel like I can add something in a conversation, then I'll have an
Mhm.
add-on conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Darren. Neil has our first question from the audience for you. Neil
Okay.
says, hey, Darren, we have talked about my product slash the service a little bit. I was wondering that when I'm offering my services as a psychological consultant for startups, what can I do to improve my visibility to prospective founders, institutions, and investors as clients? What would amplify his credibility? Because as a therapist, I don't do ads because I never go to a therapist that runs ads. I feel like the same logic applies in this aspect of my work.
Okay. That's interesting. That's an interesting one. Um, I don't know, like, whether it might make sense to talk to Ben. I know he's got the advisory group that he's spun up that's providing services to startups in various areas. Um, it might be something where he might be able to refer you into people where they're having some psychological problems, or where he feels like there might be a need for that. I think that's a good one. I think probably doing talks on this group, and having like webinar, like an actual seminar for people is always a good way to drum up some business. So people can kind of see you in action. They can ask some questions. Again, to me, it's always about building curiosity, right? You've got to build that curiosity, get people asking questions of you, and then get them to see the value in it, right? And then it's, oh, this is this is going to help me here. I think always of value is stories. I mean, it's the thing I learned early on when I started in sales. I mean, being able to be a good storyteller is extremely important, because it's easy. It's much more credible when you can say, "Oh, I went into the startup where they were failing. There were two founders. They weren't agreeing on things. I went in and mediated that dispute, and then I met with each of them individually to help them learn how to interface with each other better. And as a result of that, they went on to do X, Y, or Z."
Yeah. Well, Neil, I hope that was a helpful response. We have our next question from Christopher there. Christopher's
Okay.
asking, how do you realistically price your ask? A lot of VCs have different estimates on the investing floor. For a small company like mine, 300,000 US dollars is enough runway for 2 years. But I've gotten a response from a few VCs that this is too low for them. And if that is the case, is it too early for a company of my size to look for investment?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm actually trying to help somebody find some lending capital that's through Founders Group, and I've run into that same kind of thing that like X million is too little for them, so they don't want to start until 10 million, right? To do a debt funding. So then you've got to try to find someone in that niche, right? And I mean that's what this is all about, is trying to find people in that niche. And really, angel investing is really where you're at, right? Where people are putting up smaller dollars earlier in the company stage, where the VCs tend to get more involved as you get more toward Series A rounds. You've established the company, you've got revenue coming in, you've got the product working. That tends to be when VCs get attracted. Because remember, I mean, they've got, if you're running $100 million even VC fund, right? And if your minimum is $1 million, you could have potentially 100 companies that you got to monitor, and that's a lot of work. And there's a lot of cost to that, because they've got hotshot MBAs running around that are making 400 or 500 grand a year, even on the junior levels, and they're basically they've got to have somebody watching your company and meeting with you regularly. So I think it's just knowing who targets those things. One area to look is, have you heard of small business investment funds, SBICs?
Um, Christopher is just mentioning that he's in Europe, so he might not
Oh,
have
okay.
heard of those. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Okay. If he's in Europe, then that's probably not as viable for you. They're mostly U.S. funds, but there might be an equivalent in Europe. I don't know. There might be a European Union thing, but it's geared toward finding debt and equity funding, the whole capital structure for a startup, and they tend to target lower end startups.
I do know, Christopher, depending on like what area your startup is in, there's also a few grants that are available from the governments of Germany and Austria that you could look into. Even though it's from Germany and Austria, they still apply to the whole EU kind of area. So you could definitely look into those, because I'm looking into those as well. I'm not even in the EU. Um, awesome, thank you, Darren. We have a question from Leroy next. Leroy is asking, "Hi, Darren. We're building private ambient AI systems for homes. We want to connect with home builders to build directly into new builds. How would you suggest we go about
Okay. I think, the easiest way to go about those kinds of things is, and this is where advisors can be helpful. If you can find an advisor, if you don't already have, do you have any connections in the home building space now?
it?" No, he does not.
Okay. Okay. So that's where I think I would start looking, is for an advisor, someone who would company. who has connections in the home builder space. Because I mean, it's always, you got to get the hook in the first one, right? And if you're cold calling people, I mean, cold calling success rates are really low. So if you call 100 builders, you might get, 5 who take your phone call and 2 who meet with you and give you an opportunity to pitch. So that's a lot of work to go through to get there. Where if you can get somebody who's a retired person who sold into that space, um, I think that would be kind of your best bet. And you could kind of do that sometimes by searching LinkedIn, for people in that space, who might, you might come across someone who's retired and looking for new things to do. Um, that might be a way to go about pitching it. Again, I'm always asking, Ben, because Ben's pretty well networked, if he knows anybody in that space, as a way to, maybe some get some traction to maybe get a referral into somebody in that space. But my best advice would be to try to find an advisor who's got some connection to that space that can open doors for you. That would be a really valuable tool for you to have.
Thank you, Adam, for posting your response in the chat. If you would like to say something else, you can unmute at this time. Or I guess.
Yeah, I was just going to jump off of what Christopher had said, because he said he was in Europe. I'm not sure. Christopher, are you using euros where you're at, or are you a different currency? And the reason I asked that is because we had a gentleman come through, did a pitch. He wanted $25,000. Yes, euro. Okay. That $25,000 in Colombian cash would turn into something like $750,000 in US funds. So it's all relative about what you're asking. So that's the only caveat that I was going to throw in there.
Thank you, Adam. Yeah, definitely. I think we've seen that with a couple of our founders in TFG as well, where we're all over the world, and the purchase power of $1 is very different across many different areas and countries. So, awesome. Darren, as we wait for a few more questions to come in from the people here, I actually wanted to address something that you had mentioned about building curiosity. You, as an investor, what kind of captures, like, what kind of builds that curiosity for you, and then what immediately gets rid of it during a pitch?
Well, I mean, I tend to call myself an optimistic realist, where so like I like optimistic things, and I like things that are creative and new technology and those kinds of things. But I'm a realist, and I need to see how it's going to work and how there's an addressable market. And so nothing excites me more than a realistic addressable market, where you've got a really good shot to get there. Like we were talking about the excess compute capacity company, right? I mean, it's like you don't really need to stretch hard to get there. You may recall, or you may not have been on, but there was a pitch from a company that was looking to recycle car batteries, the electric car batteries. Well, I mean, they're talking about 10xing your money in 10 years, right? And I'm like, not even remotely attractive to me. I mean, I could 10x my money in the QQQ, right? Like, or buy Micron, for God's sakes. But like it's just not attractive to me. I mean, the vision is too far away, and it's like you're talking in terms of like addressable markets 10 years out. I mean, to me, that's fantasy land, right? I mean, with technology changing as fast as it is, anything you've got that takes more than 3 years to realize, forget about it for me. I'm like, I don't even want to hear you talking, really. Those things tend to not draw me in as much. Really about product that addresses a market need, and you can explain that market hole where it is. I think that's pretty valuable. And then to just have that be not much to get there, also valuable. Those are the two things that really pique my curiosity.
Neil has a follow-up question to that. Like, how do you evaluate deep tech spaces like fusion? Fusion reactors are like 20 years away. What if somebody comes to you, with some sort of that kind of technology? Hey, we're going to build fusion reactors in people's basements, or maybe
Yeah.
not as unrealistic as that. But what if somebody does kind of come to you, with this kind of idea where there is some possibility, and perhaps it could take a little bit longer.
Yeah, I'm not a patient investor. I am not a 10-year lookout guy. I want to see something that's going to get traction, at least in the first couple of years. Otherwise, it becomes a money pit, right? I mean, they need to raise so much money that you get diluted. You either have to top up to maintain your equity percentage, or you get so diluted that it's not really worth it at the end. And that
And I
was the
guess
thing with the battery recycling company. It's like, man, like they're going to just need to keep raising money over and over and over again, because you're talking, 8 years before they're going to make money. And I'm like, well, that's just not attractive to me at all. Maybe great technology, but when you're a little closer, I'd rather pay up in valuation for something that's closer to monetization.
Okay, understood. Yeah, I guess it makes sense because even for like some, hardware like based startups, it's like they're gonna continue raising money for like years and years and years and years, just sinking all of that into R&D and maybe become profitable, by year 7 or 8.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I mean, so much can change. I mean, you look at, like 5 years ago, 8 years ago, AI wasn't even really a thing, right? I mean, it was like not, now it's all everybody talks about, right? So things can disintermediate you really, really quickly. Like a new technology, like what if a new battery technology comes along that doesn't use the same materials that are in current batteries, right? I mean, everybody's trying to get away from those because they're very toxic chemicals that are used in those batteries. So, a whole new battery technology could take hold by that and make your whole idea obsolete.
that's very true. Yeah, and the pace that we're seeing some advancements coming out, especially in the news, like every other day, it's like, oh, this thing exists now.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so I guess there's a few comments in the chat, but Darren, I asked Ben this question, a couple sort of office hours ago, but I kind of wanted to learn about your perspective as well. What is like when you're sitting through pitches, what is something that kind of immediately makes you think like, okay, this founder has no idea what he's talking about? Like,
Ooh,
is
that's
it
an
like,
interesting. That's an
yeah,
interesting
sorry.
question. Yeah, I'm trying to think of what. I think if like for me, one is like unrealistic valuations when you see somebody with like a company and it's just starting up and they've got a 10-12 million dollar valuation on something that has no revenue, and like the TAM is not that huge, or they're going to need to get a huge percentage of it to make it work. Like it just makes me feel like they haven't done their homework on what a realistic valuation is, and they haven't talked to anybody who knows anything about valuation. They kind of pulled a number out of the air. I tend to also put a lot of credence in questions that, it's great when you're doing your pitch, right? Because you're telling me your story. And so you should be able to tell your story fairly well by the time you get to pitching. But how well you answer questions when people are, knocking you off your storyboard, so to speak, right? I like to see how people react to that. How do they react to me challenging their, or telling them their baby's ugly. Like it's how do they react to that?
Right. And do you see a lot of founders getting like very defensive? What did you kind of,
Yes,
you know,
yes, happens quite a bit. People like to think they're open-minded until you actually start critiquing what they're doing. And I give the kid, the young gentleman who started Snapnest. I mean, we had a follow-up call. I gave him some pretty harsh feedback, and he was very appreciative of it.
yeah. Yeah, I'm familiar with Snap. Like he has shown up to a lot of office hours, and he's always just like asking Neil and I for like help about this, about that, about this. So yeah, it's been pleasant to have him in some of the office hours. Then Margie has a question next. Margie's asking, do you believe now human first era is coming in business? There are plenty of startups that are prioritizing people instead of profit only. Do you see that shift as well, or is it mostly just hustle culture? Or is it still mostly hustle culture?
I we're I feel like we are at peak. Um, I would say exploitative is probably the wrong word, but I mean it kind of comes to mind like of kind of exploiting for mass profit that and kind of the social influencer culture and all those kind of very material shiny types of things. I think that era is coming to an end, and I think you're starting to see more movements toward social capitalism, where you know, for me, an investment also needs to be something that's not harming the world in some way, right? I mean, ideally, it would be world in some way. Um, I had put together a startup a number of years ago, and the technology was just not right for it. It's actually starting with AI to be a little more um, practical, but so I may dust it off. But the key of that company was 10% of profits went to the charity of the customer's designation. So it gave back to the community. And it's sort of around peer-to-peer communicating and skills development and really providing kind of a networking and mentoring place for lifetime mentoring. And there was going to be another 10% that was put up into a fund to fund people's ideas. So, so for me, that was a very important part of that business, was to be able to be giving back. So I tend to prioritize that in companies that I see. If are they treating the people they deal with fairly? Are they, is their idea exploitative? What does it bring to society? Those kinds of things. I'm not sure if that answers your question or not.
Margie, do let us know in the chat. But I think, yeah, like, especially with, AI and like, so many people saying, oh, we're just gonna lay off like 4,000 people because AI can do their jobs better. And then like 5 months later realize, wait, AI actually can do their jobs better because we need those people to make the AI do their jobs better.
Yep.
And yeah,
Yeah. Did you see
uh,
there was something published? I forget who published it, but they're showing that companies that have the most heavily adopted AI have actually had to increase their net employee count
yeah. I mean,
rather than
you need
reducing
people
it.
you need people to actually use the AI to be able
Right.
to maximize this output. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just the other day there was an article, saying that Microsoft is laying off like 4,000 people, about like what was it, 2.1% of its global workforce, and then
Yep.
like I think a year or so ago, Salesforce was like, hey, we don't need 5,000 employees because AI can do their job, and then they had to backtrack on that. Excuse me.
Yep.
Um, Yes, Neil has another question for us. Neil's asking, Do you see the AI movement stabilizing and contracting after this point?
Well, I think it's going to be like everything. I mean, if you one of my favorite books, I forget the title, the exact title of it was like, but it talks about like manias and crazes and how they're very repetitive. Like back in the 20s and 30s, like where railroads were going to revolutionize the world, and everybody was buying railroad companies, right? And then jets came along, right? And I think AI is going to be the same thing. It's going to be like the internet, right? And back in 2000, the internet was going to be the solution to every problem in the world, right? And it didn't matter what you paid for an internet company because it was all about the total addressable market, and that was all that mattered. And how many eyeballs were you getting? Who cares about revenue? And and that blew up with the Nasdaq going down 80%, right? And tons of companies going out of business. I think AI will be the same thing. I think it will settle itself down at some point in time, and it will be good. But I don't think it will live up to the hype that people um, are giving it now. It just rarely ever does.
I mean, the other thing is also like AI is like any AI you use is only as good as the data you feed it, and people are starting
Correct.
to now kind of contract on us like, hey, we actually don't want ChatGPT and Claude to have all this data about us and have access to all this like stuff. So now the capabilities are going to shrink, and then I think we can see that just
Yeah, I agree with you.
like
That's a really great point, because people are going like, I've got all this data that's worth a ton of money, giving it to you to the open market for free, so you can have your AI sort through it and like pay for it. Like, there's no way I'm doing that. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yep.
Christopher has a question for you, Darren. Christopher says, I'm a technical founder myself, and I'm really curious. When investing in software based solutions, how do investors evaluate the product? Yes, AI makes stuff work, but but the code produced is not something usable or maintainable. How do you, as an investor, figure out if you're investing in something valuable or a Trojan horse with clothes?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenging one. I mean, the challenging part with anything in software where you have to ask yourself is, what would it cost to replace this product? Like, so if someone had that idea, how hard is it for them? Like, what kind of moat do they have? Have they solved a really hard problem to solve? Um, or is it something that somebody could easily come in and take over that marketplace, right? So like, there was a company that presented, was the oil
Yeah,
field company yesterday? Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, like the oil field company, where they kind of lay across 5 or 6 different systems, and they basically pull data from that to kind of resolve problems with wells early on, in the process. Now, that's interesting because each individual company doesn't really have an economic incentive to go across the other 5, right? And may run into challenges with that, right? And it's also a niche industry. So for someone else to attack it, there's not a huge market there. So that's something that's kind of defensible. But if you get into something really generic, then it's like, well, okay, someone else could build this in, 500 hours or something, then it's like, well, that's not really very interesting. Um, does that make sense? It's really hard to figure out sometimes, because something sounds on paper, but it's like, what's your secret sauce? Like, what's the thing that's keeping, if this becomes a big product, what's keeping someone else from knocking it off?
And I guess sort of following along on that, Darren, like I know
Yep.
sometimes like when pitching, it's kind of important to show okay, like perhaps maybe they were describing the oil and field dance as their maybe beachhead, but it seemed like they were very much building for that niche. during a pitch, would you kind of want to see, like let's say a soccer product, would you want to see something that maybe is starting with a specific beachhead, but like the underlying, sauce is applicable across, different horizontals? Or would you rather them kind of, really hone in and be like, hey, we're the only players in this category? Because I feel like that kind of limits your market because there's only so many oil and fuel gases, the gas companies in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where you gotta look at valuation, right? And like that's gonna put a cap on your upside because and then you've got to think about your exit, like who's the buyer that takes you out. Because I
Right.
mean if it's a small like if it's a small niche market and they might get to be a $250 million in revenue company, which is really big size, right? But it's not enough to go public. So then it's like, who's the acquirer to get you out of it? That's what I kind of look at is like, what's my exit? How do I get out of this thing?
So how would you kind of I guess what would you like to see uh during the pitch when somebody is, kind of pitching a product like that where there is a potential where it can expand across like, different horizontals? Would you want them to say, hey, this is like we are focusing on just this, we are building, the system out for this industry, and maybe later we'll expand? Or would you want them to start the pitch as like, hey, this is something that we can do for all of this and we're starting with this?
I would rather have them be focused. I think
Okay.
startups fail when they try to shotgun things.
Mhm.
Like if you're trying to address 5 different markets at the same time, you're going to fail, in my
Right.
opinion. So I would rather do what they were doing, which is say, we're going after oil and gas, but here are 5 other markets we could go after. So now I'm like, okay, you know, that's a good market, and I still don't know who would buy them, but it could grow and be a nice cash flow engine, right? I mean, it
Right.
could be taken out a number of different ways.
Okay. Neil has kind of another follow-up to that. Neil says we were talking to a founder who recently we were talking to a founder recently who hadn't listed some of their big competitors, nor had they accounted for an exit. How would you receive a pitch like that?
Not very well. I mean, I think that's that self-awareness that I'm looking for. Um, I want somebody who's willing to do the work to really dig around and sort of tell me when somebody says there are no competitors in a space, that's like an automatic shutdown for me. Because I'm like, there's got to be somebody. I mean, the odds of you in this kind of a world being the only people who are looking at this problem is like slim and none, right? I mean, somebody else is working on that problem too, in all likelihood. And if you don't know who that is, you're likely to get blindsided at some point in time.
That's very
And I
true.
think you've got to think about the exit because at the end of the day, as an investor, I'm thinking about how am I going to get out of this thing, right? Like I'm not looking to be an equity holder here for 30 years, where I can't sell the stake in this company because there's no market to sell it into. I'm not really looking at that. I'm looking at like where can I get we're going to get my cash back.
Right. So like during the in the main pitch, you would want them to kind of list, okay, these are, some potential players in my space, big players who could just kind of come in and take me over.
Yep.
How would you react to a founder just stating, oh, we're going to IPO in like 5 years?
I mean, they'd have to have a hell of a good idea because IPOing is not that easy, right? I mean, there's a
Right.
there's a reason since Sarbanes-Oxley that there are many, many fewer public companies. It's expensive. I mean, it's really expensive to be a public company, and then to actually get your stock bought. I mean, it's everybody sees the SpaceX and goes, "Oh, it's just really easy, right?" You go out, you IPO, and then everybody buys your stock. It's oversubscribed, and it's not really how it works for most, smaller, mid-size companies, they tend to struggle out of the gate. So I would be a little skeptical of that, like unless they had some really, like the people who had the computing save company, I could see that being a public company at some point in time. If they get to the market early, they dominate, they get a lot of large players in the market, locked down, and get to be the household name in that space, then I could see them being, valued at a point where that one to me could be a big home run.
Right. Of course. Sure. Awesome. I think we just have a few more minutes left, and Neil has a question. Neil says there was a founder I interacted with recently. They were operating in a market that had some familiarity and looking at pitching to foreign investors. These investors would not have an understanding of the technical operational challenges, nor would they be familiar with the domestic market that the startup would operate in. I imagine a lot of foreign startups feel like that. How do you begin to engage with that kind of opacity?
Yeah, that's a challenging one. I mean, there's a guy that pitched. This is kind of the other. Well, it's still a foreign market, still operating in a different market, but like he's trying to do Wi-Fi in Kenya, and he needs like a very nominal amount of money. But the challenge for me is, I'm like, well, what tax and regulatory laws am I getting myself into that I don't know about? Where is the startup going to be incorporated? Is it going to be incorporated? Is it going to be a U.S. company doing business in Kenya? And if so, what are the implications of that? If it's a Kenyan company, what are the implications of investing in Kenya? I don't know those rules. Like, I don't know those regulations. So it's that's the thing of being familiar with doing business in that area. And then, as you said, the markets. It's tough to do because it comes down to verifying. I mean, like, trust but verify, right? It's like I'll listen to people, and then if I'm really interested in their idea, then I'll try to understand it a little bit better. Adam, if you have something to add, feel free to jump in.
Oh yeah, I was just saying that being on some of the investor meeting calls with Ben behind the scenes, I know that that's one of the things that he's trying to unearth, I guess is the best way to put it, because it's not really easy to figure out what those regulatory options are, what how to best save a U.S. investment from a foreign entity, that kind of thing. So that's being worked on. That's all I just wanted to throw in.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's the biggest problem with the foreign aspect of it is, like, I don't understand, like, I don't know really any of the markets of the companies that are pitching to us, right? So I've got to research the market to go, okay, is this bullshit or not, right? Like, I haven't had a chance to investigate the cloud computing people that are looking to save capacity. I mean, for all I know, there could be 100 companies competing in that space. I don't really know. They're telling me that there's not a lot of people in that space, but maybe there is.
I guess that would kind of show the lack of research on the founder's part, coming into the pitch and not really understanding the space that they're in.
Yep. And it happens a lot.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Darren. We are just right at time for today's
Okay.
office hour sessions. Thank you so much, Darren, for being here today in place of Ben. Really appreciate your time. And
Yeah, no
thank
problem.
you, everyone, for joining and asking some wonderful questions. We will see you again next week.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Darren.
Thank you, Darren.